move up and on.
So yeah, so it's just a good indication of what we can expect with city sponsored everything.
Yeah, you're going to see an influx of everything.
Yeah.
People coming out for the woodwork for, I mean, you know, why wouldn't it?
Well,
Been cooped
Tuesday
up
they
for
have
a
a
year.
dance, so
Yeah.
obviously get out again and stuff too.
The nice thing is, there's a lot more room. There's a lot more room up at the parks where there's ponds and stuff, because the water.
Well, I know Mr. Price can speak to this a little bit, but I know, it sounds like that amphitheater's booked with a lot of ancillary, non-DAC type programming,
Yeah.
more so than what we have in years past, right?
So far, we're projected to beat last year's, which was the highest number of rentals we've ever had. And if I may, one of the best things about that is we're reaching out to the local community groups.
Yeah.
And they have a place to hold their events.
So I feel,
So it's really fulfilling what the initial mission was of the
yeah.
plaza out there, so that's going to be. Okay, anybody else? Very good. We'll go ahead and move on. Jerry, change it up on us, please.
Onward and upward. Change it up a lot. Oh, that's not fair. What could be interesting about training?
Big yawn.
Thanks, Glenn.
We're still thinking.
My ego just went out. Sorry. Well, I appreciate it. I thought maybe what we could do is just talk a little bit about what happened at the session.
I love that change up. Thank you for changing.
Special session, right? You call it special because they're special up there.
Yeah.
The extraordinary session after,
Yeah.
because they're extraordinary.
They're extraordinary, yes, and they're critical
Lucrative.
thinkers.
A very lucrative meeting.
And they take in seriously those theories that involve critical race thinking.
Yes, they.
Anyway, yeah, I've never seen anybody spend so much time on so little in such a big way. We were, I was thinking, I promised Alex this wouldn't be more than 10 minutes, so I'll keep it to that positive. That we were thinking about the meeting that we had with the speaker just last week, and we were sitting in the room when critical race theory actually came up on the speaker's phone. And I don't know what happened, whether the number went out to everybody all of a sudden, but it was going blink, 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 blink. And he couldn't even concentrate on what he was talking about, could he? He was going, what is critical? Oh, critical race theory. You know, so, and then I also, Senator Milner was talking about how all the attorneys in the room know what it is because they learned about it, you know, when they first in law school. And so they're thinking, well, I missed that class. Did you
Actually mentioned
get that class?
Yeah.
I know. So I had to go look it up the next day.
You missed the class?
I missed a class. Yeah.
Mine is the
You're
same one.
thinking I missed more than one, is that?
No, I just, it surprises me being Canadian, Australian, you know, that you'd miss something.
That ought to be the reason for it.
Yeah.
So. All right, so what I wanted to do is just bring you up to date real quick on what actually happened. You remember, critical for us were a couple of bills. The ARP bill was important to us. The ARP is the money that's coming from the federal government out of the faucet that none of us have identified yet, but nonetheless, it keeps coming and none of us can object, right? So
Is money tree on that?
it's a money tree, yes. We wondered if there was one. There is one. I just called Cameron a second ago to kind of get the lowdown on a couple of items that affect cities, and there's $50 million in matching funds, local matching funds, right?
Right.
You heard that, and so I'm sure that we'll be on it right away, just looking at ways that we can capitalize on that. You know,
We did a webinar today on it.
Which was really good.
I get what she did.
And the other interesting one was I call it the My Costume Over Special, but that's actually where it came from. The $35 million incentive for cities to rezone their properties from commercial, industrial to residential. multifamily residential, or higher density residential. Giving cities a $2.5 million grant for changing the area from commercial or industrial use to residential use. And I made this comment to Cameron. I said, they're going to be very surprised at how marvelous cities actually are, because we are not enticed by ice cream cones and by dollar bills.
Sure.
We zone our areas because of why they need to be zoned. If we need more jobs, we will zone east of the base for more jobs. If we need a commercial use in West Layton, we will zone the area for commercial use in West Layton, and we'll wait for it to come because it's the right thing to do. I think they misread. They think this will only probably be capitalized on by those cities that have an area that was going from commercial to residential anyway. I don't think they're going to change your mind about east of the base and the need for jobs and the need to create, those jobs east of the base. I think they misread cities, and that's my personal opinion. Anyway, so I'm sorry about the commentary.
On the $50 million, Clint and I were talking earlier, that seems a small figure considering how much money's actually out there. I mean, we're getting 9.7, right?
Right. And there are billions.
You're matching 50 million. It's pretty small when you consider on the whole asset allocation.
That's right.
Did they come out with more when you deal with that?
No,
Not yet.
not really. Boss, did you think?
No, I think they added a few more words around it, but I think there's still a lot of clarification.
Well, I thought they were very clear about the fact that this is a working document and subject to many revisions.
Many revisions and many changes. So
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything.
But do they have a timeline when they will come out with that?
As soon as the Treasury
Yeah,
falls out with these rules. Yeah, it's.
So
They've
they
been
have
involved,
a
apparently
disbursement.
they've been.
Well, they have a disbursement.
The money's,
Two tranches.
well, the money's available right now. Go get it. And we can go get half of it now and then half of it later. But you don't have to go. But I think if you got it now, you can get it and put it in the bank, but we don't have clarity on how we can spend it. The great thing, one of the positive things.
I was gonna say, one of the mentioned that we don't have to allocate it until 2024. We don't have to spend it until 2026.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think that's really good because the point is don't rush to feel like you have to, like COVID has those hard deadlines, but this is good.
It's kind of, I agree, but it totally undermines the whole purpose of what this was for. I mean, it's supposed to be for recovery, but you don't have to actually spend it until 2026. Doesn't make any sense.
That speaks to what the real purpose was maybe, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Tied to
every 5 years later.
Yeah.
But
That's the point.
it goes back to the original comment, you just put this, it is, and
That's what it is.
Yeah,
it's
yeah. So anyway, we'll leave that subject because it is clear as mud, and it isn't very clear at all. But we'll go on. 98. That's the bill that dealt both with inspection and the other, the design review and the types of things that we can control through design ordinance based on design. And the federal government objected, of course. I think I told you to FEMA.
FEMA, it was FEMA.
Objected to the fact that two things: they don't like individual private developers inspecting their own projects, because FEMA depends on the government to represent their interests in making sure that you don't build in floodplains, that you don't build where you shouldn't be building.
How did that get? How did that get stopped? Who was the party that said, "Hey, whoa"?
I think it was the architects. Yeah, I think it was the architects that discovered. Somebody in an engineering firm with the architects said, "Wait a second, we're required under federal law to make sure that we have a building inspection checkoff from a governmental entity." And lo and behold, they've taken that out. And the plan review is the same way. They did not like the plan review being made by a private entity. The same entity that's building the house is going to review the plans. That didn't make any sense. However, they did leave in there a provision that only lets us return the plans and stop the clock once, and only for geotechnical issues. And so my personal feeling on that is that it's probably never going to go to a private inspector as a result of the change that was made. It has gone back to a point at which they're going to have to come back to the city to get that approval, because the bill doesn't provide for automatic approvals. It doesn't provide for an automatic certificate of occupancy at the very end. And so they're going to have to come back to the city anyway, and we're going to tell them, you need to correct these things. These things need to be corrected. So by taking those things out, they didn't solve the problem and put us back where we were before, essentially, is what they did on that. They didn't change any of the design criteria. We'll be talking a lot about that this summer, probably, with the Legislative Policy Committee, because there's a definite need, I think, to change the law for especially recreation communities like Moab and others that have a theme about them. And we'll see how it goes. I used to tell the developers this all the time. I said, cities are going to do what they need to do. And if you stop us with one piece of legislation from doing what we need to do, we will find a way of doing it anyway, because we need to do it. And, that's the truth. We're not going to let things degenerate. Alex made the point to the speaker, and quite frankly, a lot of this came about as a result of that meeting with the speaker and Mike Ostermiller and Alex Jensen. Alex spoke very, very strongly on an occasion about 98 to the speaker, and the speaker arranged for a meeting, and we had that meeting, and the changes were designated at that time, and the speaker said these will be the changes. Was that pretty much it? So he's humble, but
Yeah.
when he starts to get red from here out.
Yeah, like, watch out.
You're just learning that?
All these years.
28 years?
I just learned it. I said I learned it early in my career. So anyway, so we appreciate that. The other thing that was changed, and you might notice Kim is feeling a lot better about life today. And it's because she no longer has to put the cups up over the freeway.
Yeah.
Advertising to at least several thousand people. We're gonna have to do that. But, so up to 10 local spots, public spots. And it used to be 1 for every 2,000 population. It is 1 for every 2,000 population, but no more than 10 spots. So I think we got that under control in the advertising regarding elections. It's still a little bit of a task, but it's accomplishable, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's doable.
So those are doable is good. And so that's really a special session, unless any of you, any comments or questions on other items that were discussed. It was fascinating. The mask conversation was fascinating. It was entertaining, all right?
Yeah.
Could have served popcorn.
I guess entertaining means different things to lawyers than it does.
And politicians.
So the occupancy certificate is not automatically provided for,
No.
meaning that we can set the conditions on what that occupancy permit is.
Okay.
So what did they accomplish out of that?
Nothing on the inspection, in my opinion, because of everything that was taken on. Except we did get a definition of what a completed application was, which is plus for us. Because
So you can say, you can do this and this.
yeah, those are good things. So thank you, because I know how hard you guys fought too. Very actively on 98, to the point where they almost filled it.
So how did they read the meeting?
How did they read the meeting?
Leave this meeting on behalf of.
Just like this is what we have to do, we'll discuss it during the summer. That was the conversation we had with Mike. And the speaker. Speaker came up with some good ideas, quite frankly, and so did we, on how we could stop back and forth at all between the development community. And it's all based on some ideas regarding collaborative efforts that we can put together.
So basically, you're training all the other cities that were the abusers, even though we did our best to kind
Yeah,
of
I was going to mention that when you talk to
So-
Mike, it's just a couple of cities.
Yeah.
Yes.
The speakers uniquely qualified to speak to those sides.
Yes, and he's very good. He's one of the better builders.
No, just to emphasize what Gary said, which I think is really the big thing that came out of it, aside from the willingness to make the changes, up to 98 that were most honest, but to try to establish this collaborative process. And they have, years ago, Gary worked with many others worked to create that land use policy committee, which was supposed to be a collaborative effort. All these bad bills this year were circumvented, right? And it shows you what happens when you don't have that process. There's a lot of reasons, excuses people make. They didn't have time or just came up at the last minute. They're just excuses. But I think coming out of that meeting, there was a real acknowledgement that it's always better, and maybe leadership needs to make that more clear, to be involved if there's an expectation that we'll address these issues through that collaborative process. And years ago, they used to have a legislator who was involved in that, who could bring balance and direction, right? And that's been absent for some time. And so there was pretty much a commitment to identify one or two legislators who were even-handed, well-respected by cities and development community, to be back inserted in that process. So it reminds everybody we're all working toward the same objective, right? And we need to do it collaboratively. And I think that will prove really good dividends, because for years and years, these kind of issues didn't flare up. But it's one thing when a site feels like they have all the power, then they think, why do we need to go to do that? And yes, legislation like this that we passed into trying to unwind, we haven't thought through it. So, but it's true.
So thank you. Sorry.
No, that's really. You said you would try to keep it.
I did.
That's fine.
Yeah, participation.
I did.
Yeah, we
You can never predict the participants. That's the problem.
Nobody asked for a hall pass.
There you go.
Well, that was good though.
We're taking up
Good to
more.
bring everybody up to speed on
Got it.
it. All right, well then,
Thank you.
we can go to thanks, Jerry, for everything. Alex, for your input too, to go that way. Okay, let's go ahead and continue on then. Mr. Price, do you want to talk about your bid award?
Thank you, Mayor. So this evening, we have an opportunity to talk about our Ellison Park pickleball complex, resolution 2125. And if you remember, just before Christmas of last year, we received some clear directions on the direction that we wanted to go as a city, and so we've moved very quickly from that time to make this happen. The design that we came up with through a community effort, where we reached out to the citizens, not only the pickleball people, but any resident who wanted to come, is this complex of 8 and a restroom. This project includes the 8 post-tension pickleball courts, restroom facilities, sports court lighting, sidewalks, shade structures, benches, landscaping, and irrigation. The projects included in this were included in the 2021-2022 tentative budget that was approved by the City Council for $1,291,000. In the tentative budget that you guys just approved, the council just approved, $481,000 came from park impact fees, and $810 came from the ramp fund, for a total again of $1,291,000. On May 11th, we received 3 bids, with Wasatch West Contracting submitting the lowest responsible bid in the amount of $1,374,112.41. If you remember, Wasatch West was the contractor that we used for the Ellison Park splash pad, and then just recently for the Museum Plaza just south of the amphitheater. We're thrilled to be able to work with them again. They were very responsive. As you can see by the bid sheet, when you add Wasatch West bid of $1,374,112.41 to our expenses to date of $41,730.40. We have a total project cost of $1,415,842.81. So this leaves us with a deficit a funding deficit of $124,842.81. So to cover this deficit, staff proposes that we increase the 2021-2022 ramp budget request for this project by $125,000. I was able to present this request to our ramp commission on May 17th. And the ramp commission was supportive of this project and supportive of the increased ramp fund expenditure. They did request that staff try to minimize the need to use ramp funds to cover this type of overage. And they also, would like us to not go over. Which I think we all agree.
Unlike ourselves.
which we all agree on. The reasons for that overage is the same as what's happened in some of the other projects we've talked about. The cost of materials and staffing is just causing those prices to go up. And so we would suggest that if we make that increase to change the tentative budget right now and increase the ramp project expense by $125,000, it will bring the project budget to $1,416,000. So that will allow us to move forward with this project. To be able to do it in a timely manner so that our contractors can immediately or as quickly as possible order the materials and supplies they need before the prices go up again, staff would recommend that the City Council approve a budget amendment and amend this current year budget by $481,000. And we would recommend taking that money from the Park Impact Fee Fund and transfer it to the Capital Improvement Fund. And this would allow us to start the contract, allow them to order all the materials they need to get started immediately. One of the key things in the construction world right now is that, especially for tennis and pickleball courts, our construction delivery schedules are strung out for quite a ways. They simply cannot buy enough concrete to do this project all at once. But once they get the go-ahead, they can begin to place those orders so that we can move ahead with this project.
So maybe just to confirm what they're saying, if you can clear it. So currently, this was approved in December, maybe your budget, you anticipated at the time would be such that the budget, both on the ramp and the park impact fees, was in next year's budget. You adopted tentatively, but not finally. So what we're proposing is that we have the money, both ramp money and the park impact fees sitting in an account. It's not money that's coming in the future. We already have it. We're proposing to take the $481,000 out of next year's budget as part of the adoption final and do a budget amount that will appropriate that money in the current year. And otherwise, we end up with an accounting issue where we're expending funds on a project that money hasn't been appropriated. And that will give us the coverage that Dave said to allow the contractor to start now and make commitments that he can represent with actual IC's budget efforts. But it's all the same money. It's just a matter of and that budget amendment will be bringing you as part of the adoption of the final budget. Actually, through the taxation next meeting, the first meeting in June, we'll bring that budget amendment to you then. I'm not asking you to add on that tonight, but kind of those year-end close-up, bring out the budget amendments that are everything.
Any questions?
Will that tie it up? I mean, by giving them that money at this time will allow them to order at a certain price and then we'll be open. Okay.
It does.
The only thing we're gonna see is maybe a little longer, building time because of how we can get what we did over, right?
It may be extended a little. We were very careful as we screened the contractors.
Yeah.
As we talked about before, there's two main pickleball and tennis.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't get concrete, you can't build
Well, you want to get somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
So you-
And fortunately, the contractor that was chosen for this project, even before he had all these projects on the books, he went ahead and placed orders for the entire summer.
Good.
And so he feels fairly confident, unless things change, that we'll be able to move through this project this
So
summer.
that's good.
It will probably be finished late in the fall.
That's,
So when you say immediate, how soon is he gonna start prepping and getting ready? Next week, like immediacy, or what do you call it?
No, right away. If we, if this is authorized this evening, council will approve this, then tomorrow morning we'll issue a notice to proceed. And he intends to first make those orders. That's the most critical thing for
Sure.
him. But then they'll begin the construction after that.
With that, anybody else have any other questions or concerns?
Yeah.
I mean, the way the construction and building industry is, I mean, I think we do need to move quickly. It's not gonna get worse.
so let me get one thing straight. I'm a little confused. Because I always deal on the $300 to $400 range when I do my bids. And that's just because of my wife, not because of me. By waiting 2 weeks, we're okay? Or can we go tomorrow?
They'll start tomorrow.
Okay. So evidently we're all in agreement. I mean, I am.
If you're approving the contract tonight, the budget, we have all the money in the budget amendment.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
I didn't want us to be waiting
No.
2 weeks.
No, this is.
Yeah, no, great.
This is
I
a big push. We need
think it's a good thing, and yeah, it's changing contingency in a lot of things. How do you define it?
It's been a strange year budgeting and bidding.
Radically.
Just as a side note, if you're up and around the east side of town, Andy Adams project is well underway. The contractor's up there ripping it out, and it's going to move straight into construction.
That's good. Okay, we'll be happy come fall.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and continue on then with item number 4, which is a rezone request, and Chad is going to.
Thank you. Let me just get the pictures up really fast. This is a fairly straightforward zone change. While he gets that picture up, this is about an acre and a third of ground on North Hillfield Road. It's an area that's currently, there's a old boarded up home that's located there, along with an office complex to the north of that boarded up home that are proposed for this particular zone change. The request is to go to a mixed use zone that would allow for future development. The property owners indicated that the applicant, I should say, has indicated they plan to do some townhome development there. So we're having a little bit of technical difficulties here. We can't open this thing there. It's open. I can close it. Just hit open. So I cancel. Good. Thank you. So this location, 1481 North Wilco Road. Asterisk shows where that's at. This is an aerial photo of the property. There's the office building I was talking about. Here's the location of that boarded up home. This was reviewed by the planning commission that did recommend approval of the zone change request based on compliance with the general plan. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I have a couple, and I'm really struggling with this one too. And Gary just said something that kind of was my feeling with this. We have an area in the urban district. It's already zoned some of the components of what an urban district should have in it. And do we have a count on how many townhomes we've done in the last year? 1,000 maybe units?
Not 1,000.
I mean, I was at a planning commission meeting a few weeks ago, and they approved 160 in one night. So I question that we currently have commercial and, or CP3, whatever, business. If we take it away and give residential, where are we trading that off for another area within this urban district that if we repurpose them all and it becomes residential, we repurpose, the surrounding retail becomes residential, where are these people gonna go? Supposedly it's supposed to be walkable, but yet we're taking potential services away. I was on the planning commission when that house was supposed to become a taco time. We went through the hoops to get it so it could have a drive-through and all of that, and now we're taking away a potential restaurant in a residential area or in an urban development area that, we're giving that up to put another townhouse. And can anyone explain to me on these townhouses with these flex units or home office units, of any of them that we've approved that face a corridor that has actually put a business in it? If you want a townhome, call them a townhome. Don't call them multi-use, because we're not doing with them what we thought we were gonna do. I spent 5 years working on that general plan, and my idea and thought through this whole thing, and I think a lot of residents did too, of multi-use is they were multi-use. That there was a little store or a daycare or something potential within that multi-use area. If it's a townhome, it's a townhome. Call it what it is. If you want to put high density there, then the design standards in Midtown, since it talks about active urban environment while improving, connectivity through the, commercial sites, things like that. It talks about, so are we, rezoning this? I don't see a development agreement to make sure that they're sticking to these design standards in the urban center. I don't see that this is providing links to that trail that shows up on the map in the urban district. What range of price points are we talking about in these condos? Are they going to be another $450,000 condo that, so far, almost all of them that we've built were to be built by sale for the person, by owner to live in. The park is now advertising pre-leasing. The ones across from Layton Elementary are now up for rent. We are not putting residents, long-term residents in these facilities anymore. They become rental units. And I think that's defeating the purpose of buying into a community. If you own your business or you own your home, I think you have more investment in that community. And I'm really worried that we're building these, and if you want a rental, then do what's encouraged in the urban housing, and that's a multi-story 4 to 5 foot or 4 to 5 story apartment that's encouraged in this district. I just don't think doing this for another set of townhomes is the right choice. I prefer to leave the zoning as it is, because there's no guarantee that we're going to not lose all of that. Like Gary said, this is exactly what Gary's talking about. Let's just push residential, do away with our commercial, do away with our opportunities to house a restaurant or to have a law firm or whatever. It's just more housing. And we have in an urban district a zone that can have exactly what we need to make it mixed use. And I'm objecting to any more residential, giving up a good zoning in that. I just have a problem with this. If you want to put an apartment complex there, call an apartment complex. Call it a condo. But quit calling it multi-use, because it's not.
I'd be happy to address that. So this is quite different from what Gary was talking about before, in that you went through a multi-year general planning process that identified this particular area as an area that was appropriate for these types of transitional opportunities, including creating a mix of housing and commercial development. One thing that we're doing is we reviewed do these developments is we're making sure that those bottom stories of these units are designed that they can accommodate the commercial use. Now, whether they're used that way or not, that's going to be a factor of the market. And we're hoping that as time moves on, we have these units and there's a demand for those office spaces and things, that these live-work units will be able to be used for that purpose. And that's, so we're preparing for that. That's the hope, that those will be able to continue to be converted over to these.
But how's one yet? Do you know of one that we've done that way that's actually being used that way? I'm not aware of one.
I don't know if we have one that we can give you off the top of our heads, but
I
just
know
heard
there are
that.
some that have home offices, but you can have a condo and have a home office. I mean,
In Sandy and Draper, they're doing very
Sandy
well.
and Draper, but what about in Layton? We've
Yeah,
got
when the-
multiple ones here, and not one of them has, as far as I know, has leased out.
When the market again comes to a point where those are places that are viable for that commercial use, then we'll have places that are prepared for that purpose. So
What happens
so-
when our commercial and business picks up again and we've given it up and we have no place for law firms or dentist office to go because we've given all of our professional away to, and what we're doing then, instead of creating a transit-oriented or walkable community, people are going to have to get in their car and drive out to West Lake because that's where we've all of a sudden put our neighborhood businesses and all of that is not in here.
that's the
we have
difference.
it.
That's the difference, though, is that again, what was being talked about before was maybe communities that maybe haven't thought through this. We have. We have a general plan that's thought through those issues. We've placed these mixed-use corridors in areas where it makes sense. We're going to have to continue to work on that. I think one of the things that you're seeing as a council is that we had, for many years, we were working on that general plan. We identified areas that were appropriate for townhome developments or mixed-use developments, and now we're seeing the realization of that. So it may seem like, we're getting a lot of these applications, but part of that is that for a long time we were waiting until that plan was completed, and we identified those areas through that public process. Now we're seeing the realization of that, and that's why you're seeing these projects come through. However, we have lots and lots of conversations. I can guarantee you, even today, we had conversations about places that are not appropriate for residential. And in those cases, we say, no, thank you. These are areas that we need to preserve for commercial uses. These are areas that are designated in our general plan for commercial use, and we're not going to convert those over. So again, this is a very thoughtful, multi-year, multi-participant process that we went through. This is realizing that general plan is what we're doing. So again, part of it is this, that you adopted the general plan, and we're now seeing people implement that general plan. So it may seem like there's a number of these townhome developments, but that's part of just implementing that general plan.
But implementing the general plan also means protecting what we have. And like I said, there's a lot of talk about repurposing the mall. What if it comes in and it's nothing, we allow this developer to do this, and then another developer comes in and says, hey, I'm going to do this great big huge, the mall's decided to sell out. I'm going to do this great big huge, 800 unit, whatever, and it's going to be all residential. You've already let somebody else do that in a prime property area to have other things other than residential. You can't tell them, no, you can't do that. And we've just gobbled up everything we have.
Respectfully, we can.
Sure we can.
Yeah, that's the job of the council. We'll review that. We'll look at that.
And why can't we do it now?
Because this one has been deemed to be appropriate for that type of use. And as we go through the mall redevelopment, we'll look at whether that's appropriate for that or not. We'll have to have a balance of those commercial uses and residential. However, this one, and really time has shown us, you mentioned there was an application for a commercial use that never went forward. So that tells us that particular parcel probably wasn't as viable for that commercial use as we would hope. So in this case, we're going to be able to provide some good mixed use opportunities. And mixed use means across several properties. It doesn't necessarily mean we have mixed use on every single parcel has a commercial and a residential use in it. So this is a great location. We've got lots of commercial around it. The residents are going to be able to take advantage of the nearness to the mall to do shopping. There's eating opportunities. There's park not too far away. It's a little bit of a hike. There are good transit opportunities. Right, we've got a transit line runs right up this road. So it checks all the boxes for what makes sense for mixed use, and that was because during your general plan process we carefully reviewed this. So again, this is a little bit different than what we were talking about before, in that we've already reviewed this parcel and found it to be appropriate when it's time.
And I'm going to have to disagree, because like I said, I spent 5 years working on a general plan. This is not what I envisioned these multi-uses to be, is just condos. Like I said, if they want to zone it condo, call it what it is. Then I will look at that and say, you know what, it is by other multifamily uses, and maybe that is appropriate. But this, calling it a multi-use and then putting condos there with a potential of a work unit that we haven't seen, fall out yet,
And like I said, and now so many of these townhomes are now becoming rentals. If we need rentals, let's build apartments that are affordable. It even talks in here about price range. You know, let's do some lower income. It mentions specifically in this district, lower income, you know, housing. Let's do something that's going to be of value, other than another townhome that may sit vacant or the rent gets so high on it that, you know, we can't rent them, we can't sell them, people aren't buying them. Construction I read the numbers, April was 9.1% down on new construction, so maybe we're starting to see this. I just really struggle giving up, especially on Hillfield. If this was somewhere maybe a little internal, I might not have as big a problem, but this is prime visibility for a business to be on, and this is on the very skirt of this district. You go across the street and it's out of the district, and you go up a building and it's out of the district. We're right on the very corner of this urban district that this piece of property sits on, and it's surrounded by other multifamily, and it's surrounded by businesses. It says a post office on the map, and I've never known a post office to be right there, but so it's surrounding area is what it's currently zoned. Or if you want to go true multifamily, then do true multifamily, and let's look at some opportunities in this urban area on a transportation corridor that is somewhat walkable. We need a grocery store for it to really be a viable walkable area in there for residents. But I guess they could walk to Target grocery store. But look at housing that meets some of the, you know, the price point description in there as far as another $400,000 town. I'm just struggling. I don't think we're addressing our housing issue the way we need to. And I think in this particular case, we're giving up a prime commercial piece of property.
Well, I appreciate that. The planning commission did review this. It was a unanimous recommendation of approval. So
I think one of the challenges, and that's all logical, one of the challenges is who defines what's marketable and what's not. This ground has had ample opportunities over the years to be built commercially. And long before the pandemic hit, that issue, that house has been boarded up for years because it's been a pain on our side trying to deal with it. So my sense is back when commercial was really good, if a developer or investor would have thought that was a good location for commercial, they would have built commercial on it. But obviously, they have a different perspective.
Well, a good portion of it's business. I mean, we're losing a law firm out of there. We're losing multiple offices out of that. And so, you know, I don't know where the attorney's going to go because there's no business opportunities within this urban district probably for him to go. So,
but we don't know. I guess the challenge is, Don, because I don't think we don't know that. We don't know why the law firm's moving.
Right, because they leased the building and it's being sold out for $100.
Yeah, it may be, but that's what an owner has the right to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's hard. It's not dangerous, but it's presumptuous. Is what we do, right? Is to make decisions about where zoning ought to be or where it ought to be. But the market, generally, most people who own property have an interest in maximizing their opportunities around it, and so they're very attuned to that, even to the times we disagree with it, right? Because they're driven by that. But this reminds me a little bit. I think we're not trying to get rid of residential stack isn't trying to get rid of commercial property, industrial property. We've had a lot of fights and scars to prove. We try to do just the opposite. But if there's a piece of property, 1.35 acres, that is proven not to be attractive in that, why not allow it to develop in something that does add to the area? We believe that the MU, we continue to argue that the MU means one thing based on what we thought was adopted, but that's not what was adopted. MU is its own. MU is not, doesn't say what has to be on the building. MU provides for a host of options, including only housing, including only office, including only other things. It doesn't, we keep repeating that, but it doesn't mean that any development in the MU zone has to include a piece of all that. But from my perspective, that it makes sense. This reminds me of a lot of the property up on the old by Boston's market.
Oh, yeah.
When we went through that, there was this same kind of issue.
The bridal shop.
Yeah, where Destination Homes is built, those townhomes. But when that development agreement was done years and years and years ago, the council felt very strongly and said that that property has to go commercial. And the developers were concerned about sitting that far back in that location, it would ever go commercial, and yet we did it, which makes sense, and staff supported it. Everything along the antelope frontage went commercial, and that piece at the north sat and sat and sat for 10, 12, 15 years. And there were all kinds of efforts made by the city and by the developer, by the owner, to market the property. And simply there was no interest in it, even though we had a plan and agreement that said you have to put this on there. And finally, you know, after trying multiple things, the owner came back and said, can we use it for something else? And the council at that time accommodated it, and we've got nice townhomes again on that. But at least it's, not at least, it's something that adds value to the community. And from our perspective, you know, it would be nice if commercial went there, but we don't think commercial is going to go there. And at some point, we make the decisions that are before us today. It's pretty hard to predict what will happen in the future. But
what's the density difference between you and the town?
3 per acre or something, or 3 per acre.
CTH is 16 unit per acre maximum. On MU, there's not really, what's the density difference there?
It's more just
More about
a
the
yield.
size.
Yep, but they're similar typically in terms of the yield for townhomes.
I don't think you get a significant difference.
Because I hear some of the concerns that Don's shared, I hear from people in the community saying these are just Trojan horse operations. They come in these pictures showing us these nice looking mixed use developments, and they have no intention except doing anything commercial or anything other than just the townhouse idea. But my response to that is it's just a zone. We can't tell them what to do in that. If the density difference is negligible, then they're really just getting themselves more options by doing it in the other way. So I think that there's a hesitation with where some of these mixed-use areas go. This one doesn't. I don't know, maybe Don, if you're as worried about this specific area as you are just the concept that it just seems like a snowball.
That's part of it.
Okay.
I feel like we're spot zoning.
Okay.
Oh, let's put an MU here and an MU over here, but we've not really, like I said, done anything to protect what's around it for future development.
If we had not gone through this multi-year general plan process that had so much over participation, I would agree. But this is not spot zoning because it was thoughtfully recommended for this type of zoning. We're implementing that general plan. And, that's the great efforts that were completed before I got here. They were great efforts to involve the public and make sure that we were putting these types of zones in the right areas.
So I serve as the co-chair, and if I have a misunderstanding of what happened through that 5-year process, what do you think the citizens have? Now, a lot of people have brought that up. I feel like now that plan is a joke. That they just did it to, and they gave us all of these nice pictures so that we would buy into it, and that's not what's happening. And kind of what he said, I've heard some of this, they're using this mixed use so they can just put more density in there. And I am honestly kind of starting to feel that way myself. And like I said, now I'm starting to see that, granted, I know part of it's market driven. That's why we either build this or we build that. We went through a period where we built apartments because that's where the money was. All of this. We're not seeing these things be sold now. We're seeing them be leased. I don't think that was the intent of some of these townhomes. That's not, especially when we put them in right next to existing single-family home neighborhoods. There's not the stability there that we thought was going to be there. I think my concern is we don't know what's going to happen to the mall. And if we allow this to happen, then I don't have any hope that that mall is going to develop into anything but apartments or more townhomes or whatever. And all we've done is created an area where people now got to get in their car and drive somewhere because there's no place for them to shop or whatever. I almost feel like we need to take a pause on these townhomes and count and figure out where we're at. I'm worried about the impact we're having on law enforcement. We're putting a whole lot more people in smaller areas. Crime does go up in those areas, whether they're owner occupied or rentals, but more so if they all become rentals. I don't know that we've looked at the impact of that yet, and the number. And so I do worry about more townhomes, but I do worry in this particular area that we're giving up. And whether or not it's leased yet or not, I honestly don't care. Because at some point, if you build it, they will come. Well, we built all the townhomes up there by destination, and now Ross is the only business in that whole strip mall. So building the townhomes doesn't make the business follow. Whether we build here and it's going to develop business somewhere else, I don't know. It doesn't seem to really be following that pattern. This is also an extremely busy street to be putting people out onto. I don't know how many units they're looking at, and that's my concern. If we were doing an apartment, would be hopefully it'd be a way not to exit onto Hillville, but take them internally. But
Packet clarified that it would be rear entry for them.
Well, rear entry, but you still have to leave the subdivision, most likely onto Hillville. I just hate seeing given up commercial and business. I just really do.
We understand that, but I can say pretty definitively that there's no, trust me, there's no relationship between what happens to the mall and 1.35 acres of this property. They're
But it's 1.35 acres here, and then what if they decide the Dollar Tree, whoever owns that, decides to want to do their little 1.3 acres?
The mall is a commercial piece that for years and years was one of the top producing malls in the state of Utah. It's not, but it has nothing to do with its owning to townhomes. It has to do with all kinds of economic forces that are global. And trust me, nobody's going to give up that kind of commercial opportunity and try to build houses all over the top of it. So,
a lot of cities are building houses.
Well, and Don and I don't, density's not a bad word to me. I like it with some people. And so I want people to be able to have a place to live. I have family members that can't find anywhere to live because there's just nowhere to live.
And you think they can afford this $400,000 townhome or $2,000 rental?
The more places they have to live, that's supply. They need more supply.
You know what?
We need more supply.
Most of these places are sitting empty.
So I understand, and because I've heard those concerns, and I understand why sometimes it seems like a dog and pony show with it. And I agree with that because I can see they probably don't have an interest in doing anything that has anything to do with other than just some more place to live. But this place, we drive by it all the time. It's not commercially viable. I think that if we're going to have these discussions, this one in particular is we've been trying to get rid of this piece of eyesore for a long time. And if there's discussions that need to happen about what we're doing as a council, we can do that. But I don't feel comfortable drawing a line in the sand to something that this is in you every day of the week. Right on a busy street, right close to the train. I mean, this is what we're supposed to do. If it's in a neighborhood where the destination homes are, that's a little bit more of a discussion. But this one is where we want it to be. And so
Well,
it
then
seems
call
to
it
me,
what it is.
yeah.
Build
So
it
it
as a
seems to me like if we're going to have a discussion, I understand that, but I don't know about if it's this particular one that we need to draw a line in the sand on, because we really can't dictate to the market on what's commercially viable and what's not. And if it's just sitting there, it's not commercially viable, so let's rezone it. If the property owner wants to rezone it and they can make it a better use of the land, then that's what we should do.
Can you address your concerns regarding the rental zone? Is that something?
I don't know
Because
that
there's no development agreement, so we can't really say, okay,
Well, that doesn't matter anyway. They're
Well,
breaking it anyway.
even if we create these, these are going to be created as an ownership plat. A person, an individual, still has the ability to rent out their own home. So I think for us, I think what it comes down to is that you've got. I don't know how many of those are being leased. There are quite a few that are being purchased. We have to look at that. I don't have a number for you right now, but I can tell you that.
Like elementary or almost all rentals.
Well, I can tell you
I've
that
got a lot of-
some of that's true, but we've also got others that, we've got one of our employees that's purchasing a townhome in Fairfield Square right now. That'll be their home. So there are people purchasing these. We'd have to look and see
Well,
what.
Richmond America's upset that the parking's now being put up for lease because they went into that with their single family homes, assuming those were to be purchased.
Well,
So I'm just saying.
we don't know.
The market isn't allowing us to continue to sell them as for ownership. So I don't think we should look at that. The other thing I think that's.
Can I just answer the question that the mayor asked if I could answer the question? The answer to that is that we are seeing some that are being rented out, but we always do. That but they're going to be constructed and developed so that they can be sold. So there will be a time when, you know, someone will have the option to sell that, to buy that as an individual, to have that as their home. And I think I mean, that's really something that the city doesn't have a lot of control over. We have these that are platted all the time. People can choose to lease out their unit, they can choose to live in it and own it. And that's something that, again, I don't think that should drive the decision of whether or not this is an appropriate zone for this type of development. Really what it comes down to is that, again, the questions that were asked before about the crime analysis, the traffic, and all those things, yes, we did that analysis, and that was part of that general plan process. And this was, again, the result of that general plan was to designate this area as an appropriate area for mixed-use zoning. So it's not a case that we haven't done the analysis, we have. And it was a multi-year process, and again, this was deemed to be appropriate for this type of development.
So how do you answer then, right out of the general plan, right here, the bullet number so what are the design standards that are going to make this unique to the Midtown division, or Midtown area? Because it says in here, that's part of what we're supposed to have done, is establish design standards unique to Midtown. So what are they going to come with that promote this active urban environment in their building and all of that? Talks about through larger commercial sites and, things like that. So we have no development agreement. So how do we know they're gonna build according to what the general plan specifically states, what some of these design guidelines are? So do we have that?
We have a mixed-use zone that has design standards that will apply to this development. We've seen some conceptual plans. We're not talking about necessarily the development plan tonight, it's the zone change, but we have seen some development plans that they know those standards. They've begun to design to those standards in the MU zone. The MU zone has standards related to where the buildings are placed, the types of materials that are used, those types of things have been included in that. And we're actually in the process of strengthening those MU standards this time. And that's going to be the next thing we do after our landscape ordinance. And I want to make sure we leave enough time for Tim. Tim's here to talk about the landscape ordinance tonight, and I want to make sure we leave him some time. But we do have those standards in place, and we're in the process of strengthening those MU standards to provide even a little more clarity for what these types of developments should look like.
And if you're going to do them, I prefer that we have more specific and preferably development agreements in place for some of these places, especially on a high visible road.
Well, I think, sorry to add to it, I think it's important to remember is what Jerry's finished about, is you can't use a development agreement to supersede your underlying ordinances or to change those in a significant way. So I think if you want to, we understand the issue that's been raised, but there's a correct way to do that. That has to go back and look at the MU zone in totality of what's allowed and what's not allowed, and look at the standards that are around it. But right now, an applicant has made, as I understand it, has made an application under what's existing on the books that this council or prior councils have adopted in the general plan. That's the framework in which we can work. So if we don't like that collectively, if you don't like it, then we need to change it. We just can't make exceptions to it or use a development agreement to get around it.
So I just got public notice that is the next planning commission addressing the MU.
We're gonna have a work session.
Yeah.
With the MU standards.
Yeah. So I wish it had been held prior to this.
Well, we've been working hard on the landscape ordinance to get that to you.
No, I know. I'm just saying.
That's the next thing on our agenda.
I'm thinking we need a pause to review this.
So I'd just like to make one comment, not necessarily this one in particular, but I think you need to consider the other things that are in an MU. They're not just condos, there are other things as well.
Yeah.
Banks, whatever else. We're not seeing any of those, but they are part of it. So there's nothing saying that this guy comes in with an application for condos, he doesn't do it, that it can't be some of those others.
Yeah.
That's where the caution as a council member, I think you need to have is, are we willing to allow those other uses? Because once it's rezoned, those are allowed.
Yeah.
And when it comes to for rent or for owner, to be honest, I really pay zero attention to that when somebody asks, is it for rent or lease? Because it doesn't matter if it's a condo or if it's a house in a regular subdivision. Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, you can rent either one.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that can stop you from.
But I think part of my concern is that this urban district specifically calls out low income. And we're not addressing that issue. This is an opportunity in an area, if we're gonna zone it residential, is to take an opportunity to provide some of that housing. But our general plan specifically calls out in this area. instead of another $400,000 townhome unit that might be built there.
Yeah, but that doesn't address the issue of ownership or rental.
No.
Still. And I just remember what Senator Stevenson said when he was here meeting with us. There is no solution to affordable housing, and I agree totally. You're not going to solve that problem as far as affordable housing with the limited growth or the limited land to develop on and the demand for people. It's just something you can talk about all day long, in my opinion, but there's really no solution. So,
Okay,
but
you guys ready?
ownership rental to me makes no difference when they come in here because you can rent a house in a subdivision or whatever you want. Right, Gary?
That's correct. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Okay. Good to drop this discussion and move on and learn about our landscaping. Okay, let's give
Thank you.
Tim some time
Be
and
very
chat.
brief. This is just, we've taken this to our planning commission. They've recommended approval of a landscape ordinance. Tim's gonna go through some of the things that we've been working on for the last several months. The only thing I want to do right now is just give so much credit to Tim and his team. This has been one of the most collaborative ordinance rewrites that I've ever been a part of. It's just been great. The input we've had. We had an intern that did a lot of work, laying the groundwork early on for this. It's been a great effort. So with that, Tim, take it away.
Thank you, and good to be with you. I'd like to also acknowledge our visitor, Jonathan Perry, with Weaver Basin Water District. And some of you here in this body joined the Planning Commission in a tour of the demonstration landscape areas. And we had a nice presentation indoors afterwards, looked at some water-wise landscaping images, including this one, and others that you'll see throughout the presentation. Just briefly, some of the design principles and design standards that are applicable here are groupings of plant materials, predominantly drip irrigation plant beds, a small presence of lawn, and trees, and just looks nice, but this is considered to be a low water-wise landscape. Here you see some more rock, but overall the balance is good between plant materials and rock mulch. And again, the emphasis is on the plant materials, the beds, and less about the turf grass. Here are some park strips converted to from turf to plantings. And you see some of the groupings, and we were able to collaborate with Joellen Parks and Weaver Basin to study the potential water reduction. And it's not just in park strips, as you see here, but plant beds in general. If you have one converted to these water-wise drip irrigated plantings, you see the substantial potential savings. And what we've landed on in the ordinance through this study and review and feedback from the Planning Commission is a 50% plant coverage. You really don't see visually a huge difference between the 50 and the 60, but we achieve some more water conservation in this manner. So we're going to be talking about what applies to non-single family and PRUDs and commercial projects, and what might apply to single family homes. And that's one of the themes we explored when we shared this concept in a work meeting. And just the benefits of landscaping and trees and urban forestry. Ambient temperatures can be cooled and power demand go down when we have some cooling effect from trees and street trees. They do require management and the proper selection initially. They help reduce stormwater runoff. So some of these ideas are captured in the purpose statement, which is similar to our current landscape ordinance, but enhanced with some more of these principles for reducing the heat island effect and buffering undesirable appearances, and also providing for healthy outdoor recreation activities, enhancing and protecting property values, and enhancing aesthetic quality of neighborhoods and commercial areas. So just some of the highlights in the ordinance. Planning Commission suggested that in the application of this ordinance that costs have increased and values increased, and therefore the trigger for when the landscaping should be converted from an older landscape to the waterwise standards would be a $75,000 threshold for construction or improvement of a property. This would not apply to agricultural uses in the A zone, agriculture zone. And that, let's see, that these standards should be strictly followed. The only exception would be if there's a physical hardship associated with the property, then there could be reduction in landscape area, I'm reading in number 4, but only if there's an augmentation for B, mitigated through enhanced landscaping improvement. So a little bit of flexibility, but only if there's an actual hardship. And that does not mean in C that you can just get more parking and building area.
What constitutes a hardship?
That could be physical landform, a piece of infrastructure serving the community or neighborhood.
Big sewer line, storm drain line that's in the way. Yep.
Okay. You note at the top that this language will be used throughout multiple sections of the ordinance, and this is where we define everything except single-family residential in a standard subdivision or a single lot or parcel. But everything else, commercial, industrial, mixed-use, multifamily, townhome, community uses, PRUD developments, or common areas managed by a homeowners association or community association. So all of these, the landscape design standards would apply. So for projects that have not already previously been bonded, a bonding requirement would be required. And we find that when there's a major conversion of a project that's already been improved in the past and needs a reinvestment. 10% of that bond under 1C would be retained for an additional year at the completion of the project to make sure that plant materials survive and that the irrigation is working properly. Number 2 below shows that single-family homes would have a 1-year period for the front yard and potentially 2 years in the rear yard unless there's slopes greater than 10%, and that should be completed in 1 year, and that's just to prevent erosion and keep the water on the property. Okay, so again, we see the reference to everything but the single family, but also including PRUDs. We're proposing that a higher quality landscape plan submittal apply, both in a preliminary landscape plan, and this is the level where appointed design review committee members have the opportunity to review proposed plant materials and the overall landscape design and assure compliance. And then a final landscape plan. And on the final plan, there would be under 3D an owner acknowledgement that they agree to the bonding, that they agree to installation without modifications, that any substantial modifications would come back to the land use authority for approval. And so this would even entail details such as tilling of the soil and adding soil amendment, that they acknowledge that they will do those things because all of these contribute to water percolating into the soil and being retained and not rubbing off the site. And plans would be required to be prepared and submitted by a landscape architect. So here we get into the specific plant material specifications and some examples, other photos provided by Weaver Basin Water Conservancy districts show some of these principles applied. But you see a maximum turf area under 1A is 15% on the site. The only exception to that under B would be if there's recreation use, then there could be more turf grass. And then the minimum, the minimum width of turf would be 8 feet. We learned that anything narrower than 8 feet is very inefficient with water and produces overspray onto hardscape areas. Then another example, let's see, turf grass not allowed on slopes over 25%. And no turf grass in landscape buffers, parking lot landscaping, and other plant-fed landscape areas. The R.C. Willey parking lot, I think, is a nice example of those water-wise plantings with drip irrigation in the planting islands, but businesses proposing to put turf grass in those areas where it tends to have overspray would not be allowed. And then suggestion for grouping of plant materials. And then Weaver Basin maintains a current list, and they continue to update that list as they work in partnership with Extension from Utah State and have water-wise plant lists. And so we're suggesting that 90% of the plants and trees specified are from that list and that they state as much in the planting list. Soil scarification is 6 inches of tilling and then adding soil amendments into that, and that's a substantial technique for preparing a site after construction compaction to absorb the water. and apply less water. Item I is that all buildings would incorporate plant materials along foundations, at least those visible to the street, and with flexible bed depths. That there can be maybe a typical average of depth of 3 feet, but narrower for different types of plant materials can still make a substantial difference. So those are some of the planting standards. Irrigation. Yes,
Question,
please.
sorry. Did you say earlier with regard to scarification or scarification, tilling?
Yeah.
That's what Steve called it, right? Tilling.
Yeah.
That if somebody, an entity, or these entities, has already done that, and they want to redo that, they want to have their landscape contractor go in and reapply soil and then till up the ground, that they have to have a licensed landscape architect submit that request to the city, and the city has to approve that. Just to re-till the soil and put in new soil. Is that what I understood?
No, this would be if someone was coming in and redoing their entire landscape area with a redevelopment property, but someone that just wanted to come in and redo landscaping, they would
Just maintaining what
maintaining
what you're doing in a responsible way. Okay.
Sure.
That may be a real issue of that level, but initially it makes sense. But
Right, but only the landscape architect would submit if it was a reconstruction of a landscape or a project exceeding 75,000, then they would submit a plan by a landscape architect. Okay.
thank you.
Sure. The irrigation design standards, a few highlights here is that the WaterSense technology that stops the watering during cloudy or cooler, wet weather, not providing more water than is necessary when drip irrigating or using bubblers, and making sure that pop-up head sprays are tall enough to reach over turf grass, otherwise water can be wasted, and appropriate precipitation rates associated with sprinklers. So again, the importance of the landscape architect to understand these standards. Yeah.
So by having a landscape architect, because I just learned something about drip emitters, that they come in different gallons per whatever. So a landscape architect would know then to specify certain size drip emitters based on what they've planted, so that they're either not providing too much water or not providing enough water.
That's right. That the drip emission emitters would relate to the planting plan, and the water use requirement of a particular plant would relate to the emitter. So we just feel that the higher the competency of the trained individual, then the better pairing of just what.
But that's something that they would identify in the plan, is what kind of an emitter to use based on what plantings they've approved.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Tim?
Yes.
When you look at these ordinances, and we've done a lot of these in the past, you've gone to look at other cities, what their ordinances look like, what their regulations look like in the development community. Is this something that the development community is used to having to take care of in other communities that have this already in place? Or are we going to be an outlier, or are we? That's one question. The second question is, as far as the city goes, if we pass this, when this gets passed, what's the plan for some areas of the city that might fall into this as being proactive and say, yeah, we're doing this as well?
Yeah, and Chad's
We are
introduced.
already with that part, I mean, park design.
Yeah, no, I'm just talking about the aesthetically, the areas around the buildings, not talking about
okay.
parks per se, but more, hey, yeah, you guys want us to do this with these water-wise plants, but I walk up to the city building and look at you, that kind of stuff. I want to be able to say, we're doing this as well.
Yeah,
Some
good questions.
Yeah, I'll address the first question. I think there are definitely cities that require a landscape architect to be a part of the landscape planning and putting together those plans with irrigation and specifying the right irrigation and specifying the right plants. I think we're a little bit ahead though on the areas where we're reducing the turf, and maybe John can speak to that a little too. I don't know if you want to or not, but I think we are trying to be a little bit more forward thinking as far as reducing the amount of turf. Our code right now has a minimum requirement for turf in these commercial areas. We're flipping that on the head and saying maximum,
Right.
and saying you shouldn't be using that term, except for in very specific circumstances. So I think that's, again, I think in some ways we are a little bit out ahead of some of the other cities, but things like the landscape plan prepared by a landscape architect, there's lots of other cities that require that. Yeah.
The ordinance per se, you looked at other cities as far as working with this language?
Yes, and
Yeah, for sure.
we've been able to draw from multiple cities as well as the model ordinance from Weber Basin. So we think we've picked a lot of good elements and combined them to our city.
And I have a question about letter H. And I mentioned this to John when I talked to him last time, is Utah State came out with a statement that they're not so sure that the 6 p.m. to 10 a.m. is actually as beneficial as they thought it was, and inspiration, transpiration, evaporation, whatever. I know out where I live, the wind blows more in the middle of the night than it does during the day. So are we holding ourselves, by saying you should operate between these, because it's a shall be scheduled between these times, that if the studies continue and it says, yeah, well, that was a nice thought, but maybe that's not really true, do we have to change the ordinance? Or is it, and what if it is a commercial area that maybe needs to be watered during the day based on water pressures with the whole development or something? I don't know. I just worry about the shall be scheduled, or is there a way to word that it should be, knowing that or encouraged, or something that, because if Utah State study comes out and shows that that's really truthfully the case, then why are we restricting water in the middle of the night? Other than it's maybe John can answer.
Well, yeah, I don't want to speak prematurely to Utah State study coming out. I mean, we're a contributor to that study. We asked them to go out and do that study to verify essentially what's going on here. I do think you bring up some good points. It is pretty rigid, 6 p.m. to 10 a.m. That's definitely a restriction we have in place right now. And I think it's a restriction in place that applies to 95% of our service area. But you do bring up some good points. I mean, at the mouth of canyons where you've got some wind events that take place predominantly during the night times as opposed to the day times. And there will be unique scenarios, but for most of the uses of secondary or outdoor irrigation water, that 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. holds true.
I think if we see the results of that study and it tells us something different, this is something we can come back and do. It's very selective. And then,
You can make adjustments.
Sure. Yep.
And I would rather,
Well, isn't it just the shall be that trips you up?
yeah,
I don't even know if it needs to be in the ordinance.
well, no, I think it should be, shall be. Because then if we say, do what you want, then why do we have the ordinance? Shall be says this is what you have to do. And then if we need to make an adjustment, we can make an adjustment.
But it may come down to where I grew up in Colorado, we watered 3 days a week, and we were assigned based on which side of the street you lived on. Those were part of their ordinances, and so
Sure.
and regulations. So it may be that we get more restricted than just that, or maybe it gets loosened down the road. I don't know.
Well, we've got quite a bit. It might be that we need to come back. Yeah, this is a comprehensive change to the ordinance. So maybe we could just touch on maybe 5 more minutes, and maybe we could schedule some more time with the council.
That's one question. I read this, it gives me a headache. Okay, and I mean, it's a lot of information. And I understand a landscape architect deals with it. To him, it's like 2 + 3, type of thing. But how do we govern it? Yeah, we get a plan that says, hey, I'm doing this. But I see the plans where all the trees are supposed to live and they're all dead. And they've been dead for 4 years. So how do we do something that says, you have to make a change here, something's wrong? I mean, is that going to be up to our inspectors?
Yeah, there's 2 things that'll happen. First of all, we do rely on those landscape professionals to give us plans that'll work. And, so we are going to rely on them to say, hey, I stamped this, I put my stamp on it, it's going to work. But the other part of it is, Tim kind of hit on this very briefly, but we have now some bonding that will be required that will require that they it keeps the money in place in case there's some
Yeah, I
die-off
saw that,
trees.
the little,
And so that'll be the second piece of that
Right.
puzzle is we'll go out and re-inspect and make sure things are alive, and if they are, we can release some of that money back to them at that time.
Yeah.
So that's two ways, and we will have to again coordinate the inspection of that landscaping
you know,
with
put that on your,
Your
on the
video
checklist.
list.
Yeah, it's on there.
Checklist.
Yeah, we've added that recently, and that's gonna be
because
an
you know, it's
increase.
hard. You know, and when you start talking about bubblers, and this and that, I mean, it's,
So over here, you're talking more commercial, residential, homeowners association. Some of those you could do when they come in for business license.
Yep.
Renew.
Right.
You can enforce it.
Which we do.
Right?
Yeah, we have folks that'll chop down trees in between, and we'll come back and say, you need to put that tree back before we're gonna give you a license.
Yeah, 'cause I can think of some that they put them in to start, but then 3 years down the road,
Yeah.
they're worse than they were to start.
Gary, is there, I know the state's really interested in this, water? Is there talk of state mandates for ordinances or bills that maybe we talked about to kind of insert what we're trying to do here?
There's always that type of talk. I remember taking us a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, tried to eliminate park strips, grass park strips. So I'm not saying that there won't be in the future those types of legislation proposed, but who knows?
Drought conditions
Yeah.
exacerbate people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Assessment table, or they say the hardship.
The legislature will take care of it.
And the federal government now,
Right, yeah.
quite frankly, so.
This that would run.
Just an observation on that point is that there should be where these things cycle.
Yeah.
Water conservation is always really important. Sometimes it's extremely important, like when we're in the middle of the drought. That's when people pay attention to it. But 2 years from now, we may be cursing with all the water flooding. Right? That's what happens in Utah. But I was going to say to John and his folks, I would assume that at the state level, hopefully, I assume that they would be talking with Irrigation Water and the Jordan Valley Conservancy, the big water users who are really leaders in this. The reasonable folks in the legislature, right? They're going to be outliers.
I understand.
Hopefully, if we're working with Irrigation, we're getting good data. Hopefully, anything the legislature pass, hopefully, will be based on good data. So I don't know if we can find ourselves way outside of that, because I think you guys have a lot of influence in a lot of conservancy districts.
Can I just say that there is an official water task force, which consists of elected officials, Weaver Basin, the LDS Church, some of the big users in the state, and then all of the water buffaloes, they call the water buffaloes. And they're, almost every water bill is vetted by that group. And they're really highly regarded. Nothing passes unless it gets through that group, and there are legislators in that group as well. So you're right, you're exactly right.
I think it's important for us to be, like you said, Chad, to be kind of on the forefront. I mean, water goes up and down. We're living in the desert, so and more people that come here, the more finite resource it is. So I just think,
We see ourselves as the leader.
right.
If the state does, hey, we just want to do based on good data, we're already there.
And I'm not trying to make it like we're doing anything that's, I mean, a lot of what we've done
No, it's
is
just-
from the Weaver Basin.
This is good.
Yeah.
I would just rather be,
Yep.
I mean, it just shows that we're not just, we're forward thinking. That's good.
I'd just like to briefly mention one concept that came from the ordinance, the model ordinance from Beaver Basin is for a developer in a PRUD or condo townhouse setting to landscape one of the model unit or the model unit with waterways landscaping. Now, this is not showing just one home, but one of these, let's say, is the model, and it would be landscape similar to what you see, and then it's on display to all the buyers that come in. There's brochures, there's reference to the city's ordinance. And so Planning Commission kicked that around and ultimately decided they'd like to recommend the council adopt that into the ordinance. And then this is an example, I'm not sure, this is not showing turf, but up to 35% of this could be turf. And it's kind of presumed that this would be more turf in the rear yard, and with say a PRUD reduced setback, you could see landscaping like this. And here it's cut back in the early spring and will grow out. So just kind of some ideas to keep in mind that we'll continue to discuss next time.
Thank you, we appreciate it. I know that there's been a lot of work and effort on all levels. We appreciate the planning commission for their investigative work. So I think that helps. And for Weaver Basin, for the concrete, that was great. Okay, real quick, like, as far as any mayor's report, the only thing I can tell you guys is, and I'll make it quick as well, out of the sewer plant, south of the sewer plant, it's the south end of all that property that they own. There is a company that's come in and they want to put in a sports complex. That property falls in Syracuse City. And so the board's looking at that, trying to make determination to go with it. I mean, but at the same time, I'll seek any feedback from you guys as well.
That'd be awful green grass.
I'm surprised they wanted that location, but they're actually seriously looking at it. So,
Outdoor?
it would be an outdoor sports complex. It would be softball, tennis courts, and some pickleball courts, and surprisingly, a
They
small
have some
concession.
mosquito abatement.
Yeah, really. They're gonna need big fans as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, so that's the only thing that I can report on, but it looks like that. The company's come out twice now, and it's really pushing it hard, and I think they're just, most likely it will go through, but I don't know. I just wanna let you guys be aware of it. I mean, it is something that would benefit the whole county, because I mean, the county would really
Yeah,
have that
especially-
type of a complex.
Especially Gentile. It's really not bad.
Scott, you want to see on the down?
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, could I have a question on that? The paramedic agreement we previously agreed, we're gonna need to bring that back. We have all the cities address that again, so we'll bring back in the next meeting. There were two changes that were driven by the county being willing to put in about $2.25 million to provide for the sheriff's office coverage to those contract cities that don't have their own services during the interim year and a half. That was never spelled out in the contract, and so the county, since they're putting that in there now, the county wants to memorialize that in an agreement. So it doesn't affect us or costs, impact at all, it's just for the other cities. And the second piece is there was a date that was originally in there, June 2021, by which the cities would all indicate to each other how they intended to fund it, because everybody has to go through truth and taxation to keep the rate or increase it. We're proposing to change that date to the end of August. Those are the only two changes, but rather than amendment, the county said, no, we want everybody to re-sign it. So we'll bring that back next meeting. Just want to give you guys up.
Right. Okay, 1 minute to go.
Can you give us a couple minutes? If not, I'm gonna be
Okay.
late.
All right. We'll start a hair late then on the next meeting.
I burned it up in the car on the way here, but I just. Well, and I have a jacket out in the car. Because, no. I know. Okay, we got 2 more council members yet? Yes.
Well, and when I get up and leave to go out, it's going back on. I'm not going anywhere without it. Because I can guarantee you 60% or 20% vaccine in the state. We have 100% of the stores without it. Yeah.
Our signs are coming down. Nobody's doing it. Take the signs down.
We've lost it.
It's okay. All right. Looks like we've got everyone present here. Kim, are you good?
Okay.
And I take it the guys are good in the back? All right. Well, welcome everyone to our Layton City Council meeting, January 20th. The start time is 7:04. We appreciate your small patience there for us to take a quick break in between meetings. I would, this month is my month to conduct the meeting. And so with that, we'll be doing the prayer, the pledge, our opening ceremonies basically. And what I'd like to do is I'll start out with the pledge, which I'll lead. And then right after that, I'd like to call up one of our former council members. Oh, Janice is going to say it? Okay. Well, on behalf of the Carter family, we've got both of them here tonight, which we do appreciate it. And so one of them will be saying the prayer. And then I've actually asked them to take another couple of minutes just to quickly brief you on what our Interfaith Council is so that we can all kind of learn about that as well. So with that, I ask you to please rise and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we are thankful to be here this night. We're thankful for our many blessings. We're thankful for the blessing of being able to live in this great community, in this great state in our nation. We pray for thy guidance, for thy hand in directing those who govern our nation and our state and our city, and pray that thou will bless and guide them, that they will be fair and honest, and look to thy help for guiding the issues of this city. We pray for thy spirit to be in this meeting tonight, that all will go well, that things will be civil, and pray that we can be good examples of civility and kindness and respect, and that we will always do our best to stand for truth and righteousness. We pray for the people of our city, that they will feel united and feel like the best is being done for them that can possibly be done under any circumstance. We pray for thy guidance and give thee thanks for our many blessings, and pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Scott, you want to take a few minutes right now?
I spent a few minutes behind this, my friend, the podium.
It's got your initials on.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, Mayor and Council. It's good to see you and good to be here this evening. And my friends from the staff. We come just to talk for a few minutes about the coordination of the city, between the city and the Interfaith Council that we have, that was initially started by Mayor Bob Stevenson, and he got things going with the pastors here in town. And so we have this Interfaith Council that has kind of gone to the wayside for the last year, partly because of COVID. we haven't had any meetings during the COVID pandemic, but we're getting ready to kick that up again. We like to meet about every 2 months and go over issues that affect religious community and the city, and anyone that's interested in seeing that our community values are carried forth with the various religions and the city. Shortly after I retired, in fact, within weeks, Janice and I were called to serve in the LDS Church on the Weber Communication Council. That council covers an area actually from the north line of Weber County to the south line of Layton. So our responsibilities cover that entire area, and we do various things in the area. About 7 or 8 years ago, Mayor Stevenson, as I said, began going around to the various religious pastors to try and get them to come together as one and serve in this Interfaith Council. And for that period of time, we've had great support from the city and great support from the pastors and Father Sandoval and different religious groups. And we include the Buddhist monks as well in that community. It's something that we would like to get more fire under right now and get things moving along. We think we have issues that need to be addressed by both the city and the Interfaith Council. So we're asking that the city stay intimately involved with that Interfaith Council to help provide motivation for those people to come together and serve as one. Just a little bit about what the Interfaith Council does and what the Weber Communication Council does. We have been, we think, an integral part of bringing our community together, and it's more than just the monthly meetings. We co-sponsor the oversight of the Layton Christmas concert the Sunday before Thanksgiving. And so we provide the ushering and making sure that things go well there. And a subgroup puts together the choir and so on. But we also oversee the oversight of the Ogden Pioneer Day devotional. We are in the Ogden Pioneer Day parade. So those of you who've maybe gotten an assignment lately to provide a float for the parade, that assignment probably came from the Communication Council. We also provide a fall interfaith concert, and that is done at the Ogden Tabernacle. That is in a little bit of jeopardy, as is our devotional this year, partly because of COVID, but partly because they are revamping the parking at the Ogden Temple because there is, quote, a river running under the parking terrace. So they have to get down and under the terrace and get control of that river. What we want you to do as mayor and council is to talk to your neighbors and friends. I'm sure all of you have friends that are, and neighbors that are not members of the LDS faith. And people think that this is strictly an LDS function, and it is not. It includes all of the different religions in this city, all of them. all of them that we've been able to find. Now, we know that there are some that are practicing out of a home that maybe have 4 or 5 members that we just can't find, but they're out there. We're trying to build bridges of unity, respect, service, trust, and kindness among all of our community. That is our function. That is our effort and focus. And we would ask for the help and just sort of the participation in the Interfaith Council here in town to help us move that along. We want to get things moving again after the 1-year hiatus. It's time to get started. It's time to get fired up. And there are several of our pastors that have contacted me, or we've had contact through the COVID pandemic, that really are they really want to get things moving again. And so now is the time. So
Thank you.
Thank you. If you have questions, Janice is over there.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I thought it was well worth of everybody's note to understand that we did have this council in place at one time and that it's time to kind of really reignite it. And so, again, thank you for participating, not only saying our prayer, but also giving us an education on this council and for your past service here to the city. Very much so. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor, may I ask a question? Is that all right? Scott, you mentioned so thank you. You mentioned that we need to meet. You've got issues to discuss. So a couple questions. What is the major issue or the most important issue that you're working on? And my second question is, are we seeing in the community issues with persecution in the religious community or religious freedom issues in our community? What are you seeing?
The major issues at this point, we are constantly talking about the problem with the suicide rate. And it's a problem here in town and everywhere, and among all the different religions and all the different age groups. She's coming.
Something else that you should be aware of is a lot of these churches have food pantries, and so they're always willing to take food donations. But also, if you know people who are in need of food, Christian Life Center, Layton Hills Baptist, Faith Baptist,
Nazarene,
Church of the Nazarene, they all have food pantries or food. They give out food, okay, have a day and time. Church of the Nazarene gives out food every Wednesday evening, I think at 7 boxes of food. So just be aware of that. If you have friends or neighbors or family members who are in need, they're a good source besides our own, I guess, Bishop Storehouse, another source. And we've helped a lot with that. We've volunteered a lot with food things.
There is some unfortunately, some bullying, we'll say, of other faiths, particularly by LDS. At least that's what I'm told by pastors that grew up here in town, but were not of the LDS faith. And they worry about their congregation, the kids in their congregation. And the congregations typically from other faiths other than LDS come from wide areas. It's not just Layton. They come from as far as Holiday and Logan, North Ogden. So it's hard to just get a handle on it in Layton. But yes, it does. Persecution is out there, unfortunately.
All right. Well, again, thank you. I really appreciate you helping me out
Thank
tonight.
you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. Council, I need to get the meeting called to order, and I do need to recognize one special individual sitting out there in our audience. She happens to be one of our student council kids. Her name's Kara. She was also there last night helping us out, so thank you for attending. Okay, council, I need to have a motion regarding our minutes for our city council meeting on March 4th, or if you have any corrections to those minutes. Okay, no corrections. Anybody want to make that motion? Do we accept them?
Sure, I'll make the motion to accept the minutes of Layton City Council meeting, March 4th, 2021.
I'll second it.
It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move on to our municipal announcements. So I'm not sure if Councilman Day, do you have any announcements maybe that you'd like to share with us?
Councilman Day.
Oh, sorry, I looked at Thomas. Between you two, I can't.
Just so you know,
Yeah.
I'm the ugly one. The only thing I think that is.
I won't argue.
Handsome man.
That's right. The only thing that I think we need to iterate, if that's a word, to the people in the city is the 4th of July is still going on.
Mm-hmm.
The 24th of July is still going on. We have a program on Sunday, it'll be actually on the 4th this year, Voices of Liberty. And because of that, on Voices of Liberty, in case you don't know, we bring people from within the city that have done fantastic things. This year, they're looking at people that are community, volunteers, and especially like first responders, people that have worked through the COVID, with tough jobs and did great things. But it takes somebody to write something about them so that we know what went on, so we can choose them. And one thing I may add to that, I hate to add length to anything. I drive up and down a street every day, and in the yard of a house on that street, it has a sign that says, I'm a hometown hero. And I never thought that people would take it like that. But then recently, my wife showed it to me. There was an obituary in the paper, and one of the things they mentioned in the obituary, that he was a hometown hero of Layton City. And it just kind of makes me feel good that we recognize these people, and it's extremely, to them, it's quite an honor. And so if you have someone that you know of that is deserving of an honor such as this, get the information. It's on the website, right, Dave? Mm-hmm. You can go under Parks and Recreation. It's there. Voices of Liberty, Hometown Heroes. But do it, because there are people out there that are very deserving of it, and we need to recognize them.
We do, and I hope they never take that sign down. Anyone else have any announcements?
On the website, it shows there's something also on the 3rd of July, surf and swim centennial, kind of guess it's pool party, so.
Yeah, come hear the band. Right.
And then just to reiterate, our actual celebration will be on Monday, the 4th.
Right.
Or excuse me, the 5th, sorry. But it is Monday. On Monday, and the parade time is 10 a.m. as usual, so.
Well, I was just going to say, if you missed the fireworks this year, you blew it.
Yeah. Yep. It's going to be very good. Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you. We'll move on then to our citizens' comment period. So if anyone in the audience would like to make a comment, and I know Mr. Crane has been watching our online comments as well, so if there's anything there, he'll share it with us. But does anybody have anything they'd like to share at this time? Okay, if you would, just stand up, come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and then let us know what you're thinking.
Sure. So my name's Colin Mortensen. Address is 2518 West Sunset Way. I had I guess a question more than a statement, at least for starters. I reached out to, I think it's Mr. Price, about the Harmony Place Park that is under construction. I know they just barely started construction there, and I live right across the street from the park. We're super excited to have it. We're really looking forward to it. One of the things I emailed him about, though, was that with talking with some of my neighbors, we were concerned and wanting to give a little bit more input about the parking lot lighting, especially with our houses being so close, like right across the street from the parking lots. I know that in a lot of the other parks in the city, the lights are, they're pretty tall, they're bright, like white. I don't know if they're halogen, but they're really bright lights. And we had been hoping to try and see if there was a way to still meet the goals of the city to have, lighting that is effective enough to provide good security for the parking lot, but to have it maybe be less invasive or intrusive to the homes that are right across the street or that are bordering the park. And he was kind enough to respond to me, but he said that he would reach out when we got closer to that part of the design phase. And I'm not trying to badmouth him at all. I reached out again, or I tried to send another email. I didn't receive a response. That's fine. I'm not worried about it. But mostly I just wanted to see, is that something that I should be addressing to the city council and talking about? Or is that something that would be better off talking with the Parks and Rec meeting? Or is there a better venue to discuss that?
Actually, this is your place. I appreciate it. And the fact that you are coordinating with Mr. Price is great. And I can assure you, with the attention you've brought to our this council here, we will definitely help oversee that. And most likely, I can't speak for them, but most likely, I'm sure they'll probably have some type of, whether just the way they angle it or shielding to prevent the light spread, I'm sure would take place into the neighborhoods, because I know that they did discuss it in the original plan.
Okay.
I think just as far as the exact angle details, he probably isn't prepared to tell you.
Right, and I understand that. Mostly it was just the fact that they were starting construction, and so we didn't want to have missed our window of opportunity, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So,
well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Price is here, and he would like to address you as well. So
okay.
I'll let him speak.
Okay, perfect. Sir, thank you.
If I could join you.
Yeah, please.
We appreciate your contacting our office, and if we didn't get back to you in a timely manner, I apologize.
No, you're fine.
But we did take a serious look at your concern. We brought it to our landscape architects as they were designing the park, and we found that your desire was relevant to the park and important. The parking lot lighting has been developed so that it is directional by nature, and it is focused to the parking lot. It actually meets the dark sky components of lighting. And so I think you'll find that it does not intrude as much as some of the larger, older fixtures that you see.
Perfect.
There will be the standard city poles along the street as part of the subdivision development, which is the standard style the city uses. But as for the lighting inside the park, we did appreciate your concern, and we actually implemented that. So if you'd like to contact our office, we can give you the actual details of what we chose.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else? Mr. Crane?
Yes, just one online comment from Paul Hubenthal. And he just indicated for council meeting comment, he says, cars are encroaching on bike lanes while making right turns, putting cyclists at risk. What measures can be taken to correct this? And it's probably likely that we'll have the police chief respond to this, just to let him know. And then it is a problem. It's an issue because cars think that the interior lane is a turning lane oftentimes.
Right.
And so there may be some things we can do, but we'll submit that to the police chief and see if there's anything we can do.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, Paul, for submitting that. Okay. If that was the last one, then I think we'll go ahead and carry on with our meeting. We'll move on to item number 5, which is our consent items. We have 2 of them. The first one is a resolution authority to exchange property between Layton City and Brenda Eller, I guess is how you'd say that. And anyway, I'll let Mr. Crane present that to us. It's resolution 21-17.
Thanks, Mayor. Members of the council. I think we have a drawing on this. Yes. The Ellerns and the Stevenson's property. This situation dates back all the way to the time that the subdivision to the south was constructed and a detention basin was actually received by exaction from the developer at the time. The entire parcel was received by the city. The parcel lines, the north parcel line actually showed ownership by the city of parcel into the Stevenson property. If you take a look to the north, it looks like almost the state of Utah, but it's if you look at the northern line, it encroaches into the Stevenson property quite a ways. And if you take a look, there's a little cabin right there that has been there since the beginning of time. So why this happened, we weren't sure, but the developer at the time, it was just a single parcel. And he dedicated the whole thing to the city, and the engineers determined that they could actually construct the pond on what you see. You can actually see the outline of the pond, basically, and that's all the city will ever need. So what the Ellers and the Stevensons came in and they said, is there a way that we could actually do a trade for that property for something the city needs? By way of easement and also right of way along Rosewood. And so we looked at it, and we looked at it some years ago, but they just recently came back with a proposal. And so this area here is the area that we would grant to the Ellers and the Stevensons, and it's approximately 9,000 square feet. And then the next drawing will show you what the city will obtain. The city will obtain about 6,343 feet along Rosewood, which we would need to acquire eventually when we actually put curb gutter, sidewalk, and widen Rosewood. And so we would acquire that with this trade. And then we would also acquire an easement, which is in the hatched area on the eastern portion of the property. And that's approximately 4,265 square feet. We looked at the exchange and we looked at the logic of it, and it does make good sense. The property that the city owns is right squarely in a quarter or a third of their backyard. And the property that the city needs is in the right of way that we would need in the future to widen that road and actually put curb gutter sidewalk there. So with that, staff would recommend approval of the exchange of property. It seems to be a fair exchange and the values seem to be roughly equivalent. Are there any questions about the parcel?
So I had a hard time finding this because 500 North Adamswood, there's also another regional detention basin too that's surrounded by like the moratorium and the apartments and stuff. And I'm where are we talking about?
Yeah.
So having had that particular picture, because this detention basin's up behind a chain link fence with slats, and so until I drove around and saw the reeds growing, I had no idea where we were talking about.
Oh, okay.
So just FYI. But what's the purpose of the easement to enter in off of 575 North? That I get the Adamswood Road But then there's that other
Access easement.
3 point whatever acres, yeah, that's hatched. Because the gate to the property is further to the east. So what would be the purpose of that?
Just if we ever needed to expand the pond,
Oh, okay.
we could expand it a little bit further. You never know in the future. We just wanted to plan for the future to make sure that we had enough space to be able to expand it if we needed to.
Yeah, because you've got this detention basin, and then across the street, that subdivision, it's the senior homes, has their detention basin. And then just on the other side of Adams, would you have the huge detention basin?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, my gosh, is there like lots of water up there?
They all service different uses. One is more regional. The big one that you see is regional. It collects water from a totally different area than the other two do. The other two are local to the subdivisions that were created. But that big one, literally, it takes water from a lot of the east part of Layton and north of that. I can't tell you exactly how much, but it is a major line. It's a major line, so that it services. Thank you.
I think that was good. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Crane. We'll move on to item number B, which is a bid award. So I believe Mr. Price is going to address us again regarding some pickleball courts.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing Resolution 21-25. This resolution authorizes the execution of an agreement between Layton City and Wasatch West Contracting for improvements at Layton City's Ellison Park Pickleball Complex and Restroom, located at 700 North, 2200 West in Layton, Utah. This project includes 8 post-tension pickleball courts, a restroom facility, sports court lighting, sidewalks, shade structures, benches, landscaping, and landscape irrigation. This project and these improvements were included in the 2021-22 tentative budget approved by the City Council for $1,291,000. On May 11th, 3 bids were received, with Wasatch West Contracting submitting the lowest responsible bid in the amount of $1,347,112.41. Wasatch West Contracting was the contractor who built Ellison Park Splash Pad and the Museum Plaza south of the amphitheater. Therefore, we have a great deal of confidence in their ability to do this project. When you add Wasatch West Contractor's bid to our expenses to date of $41,730.40, we have a total project cost of $1,415,842.81. This leaves us with a funding deficit of $124,842.81. Staff proposes that we increase the 2021-2022 ramp budget request for this project by $125,000. The Ramp Commission was supportive of this project and supportive of increasing the ramp expenditures by $125,000. But they recognized, recommended that the staff try to minimize the need for the use of ramp funds to cover this type of overage. With this tentative change to the budget, it provides $1,416,000 for the completion of this project. To enable the city to enter into an agreement with Wasatch West before July 1 of 2021, and to allow the contractor to secure the necessary materials, the City Council will need to authorize a budget amendment to transfer $481,000 from the Park Impact Fund to this year's Capital Improvement Fund. This budget amendment will fund the project during the current budget year and allow the city to execute an agreement and allow the construction to start. Staff recommends the council adopt Resolution 21-25, authorizing the city manager to conduct negotiations and execute an agreement between Layton City and Wasatch West Contracting Incorporated for construction of Layton City's Ellison Park Pickleball Complex and restroom.
Very good.
Any questions?
I'm all for this, but on my copy in here, it shows the shortage is $157, not $125,000. So can you explain to me where the other money comes from?
Which
On
document?
the little, so if you look on this chart right here, when you look at the very bottom, it says the complex and restroom funding gap is $157.17.
So that demonstrates what the funding gap is after we increase the ramp fund to.
Of that 125,000, okay.
So that gives us a little bit of extra, 157 to in the positive.
Any other questions, council?
Oh, thanks, Dave. We had a nice discussion. I remember when this came about, and you were very receptive to what we kind of wanted. So we just thank you. I mean, you had to do some work to get it to this point, and we just appreciate you, all you do. So thank you.
Thank you. That's kind of you.
Okay. Council, that brings our consent items to, well, we only had the two, so basically I need to take some action here regarding both items. Does anybody would like to make that motion?
Sure, I will. Madam Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 21-17, the resolution authorizing the exchange of property between Layton City, Brennan Ehlers, Corin Stevens, and Adam Stevens, and Resolution 21-25, the bid award to Wasatch West Contracting for the Ellison Park Pickleball Complex and restroom.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. All in favor of our consent items? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to our public hearing. And tonight we have one item, which is a rezone request. And Mr. Chad Wilkinson will present that item to us.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is a proposal for a zone map amendment from BRP and CP3 to MU. The property is located about 1481 and 1513 North Hillfield Road. Bring up a copy of the map here really quick. The location of the property is shown there in with the red dot. You can see that the loop road for the mall is right there on the southwest portion of the property. Go to the next photo here. This is an aerial photo showing the property. The existing zoning is overlaid on this photo. You can see some of the surrounding uses include some multifamily residential to the west, single family to the east, some commercial uses to the south and to the north and along Hillfield Road. The property is approximately 1.35 acres in size. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission. This is in an area that's designated for urban district in our code, or excuse me, in our general plan. This zone district is consistent with that urban district designation in the general plan. The Planning Commission reviewed this and is recommending that the council approve the proposed zone change to mixed use as contained in Ordinance 21-11. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Council, you have any questions? Okay, there's no questions, and I'll look for a motion to open our public hearing. Hello?
I make a motion to open the public hearing.
Thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing, so we'd invite anyone who would like to make a comment on this rezone request. Please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing that there's none in the audience that wish to speak on this, Mr. Crane, by chance, anything online? Nothing? Okay, council, any other questions?
I just have one for Gary. So Gary, I just need to state my opposition reasons, correct?
That would be good.
Okay.
In the discussion, after the motion's made.
Then before that, okay. Okay.
All right, seeing that there's none, then I'll look for action regarding the rezone request.
I make a do I have to wait 30 seconds?
No.
I make a motion that we approve the mixed use change. I can't see anything in here, ordinance 2111.
Second.
Close.
Do we want to close the public hearing?
Public hearing?
And close the public hearing before I said that, in case you didn't hear that part. Right?
Very good. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded by Councilman Bloxham. So council, is there any discussion on the motion, on this motion?
Okay, I'm going to make a statement. Most of you heard this in the meeting, but I was involved in the general plan for 5 years, and so I think I'm entitled to my opinion on this, whether or not everyone thinks I'm wrong in this, but this is my opinion on this. I think this is an area too great of to be giving up the business and other zoning that currently sits on this. I'm concerned that we're giving up valuable office space zoning that is mentioned in our urban district with the general plan. The general plan talks about office in this area, and so as part of this whole urban development, so I don't understand why we're giving it up. The second thing is I have a concern over these flex use, or we put these condos in multi-use zonings. Call them what they are. If you want to come back with a condo designation for this, I would consider that at that point. But this multi-use, my concern is, and it was brought up by Councilmember Day, we can approve this with all the intent we want. We have no development agreement. This is going to be a condo, but they can come back with something different in the MU zone, and it may not be something that we thought was appropriate for that area. So I think it's too open and vague at this point. And in the general plan for this particular area for the urban district, I mean, we already have a lot of apartments and townhouses around it. It says specifically, if you're building residential under this general plan, we should be encouraging 4 to 5 story residential homes. And that is not what this is going to be. So I do not believe that this matches our general plan for the urban district.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion? If not, I'll call for a roll call vote. Okay, seeing that there's none, I'll start with Mr. Thomas, Councilman Thomas.
I'm for.
Okay, Councilman Morris?
Aye.
Councilman
Nay for the
Fitzpatrick?
reasons I listed.
Okay. Bloxham?
Aye.
Yay.
No, and I will say my opposition, I agree with Dawn's, everything that she said. And also concerned with some of the other uses that could happen in the MU at this point.
Okay. So it passes. Vote is 3-2.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council, is there any other unfinished business you'd like to bring before us? Okay, seeing that there's none, I'll entertain.
Whoa. Just a reminder of what happened last council meeting on the road between Hillfield and Gordon, by the park, that we don't forget it. I'm not saying anything. I just said we talked about addressing it, and I don't want it to take a long time or fall by the wayside. So I'm just reiterating that it's something that we need to keep in front of and not wait.
And I agree with Dave.
Okay, I know that the staff has been on that, and if you'd like, I'll let Mr. Jensen speak to that.
Yeah, just we're very well aware of that,
I know.
and but we appreciate the reminder. We had several discussions with engineering, and they're refining their analysis that was done before. We're looking at all the different options to address the issues there. Based on the conversation we had last time, you know, in our view at least, they're limited in terms of what we can do, because we've got to meet state law with regard to crossings and types of crossings and locations of crossings. But we are optimistic that there will be there's opportunities for adjustments in speed limits. They're based on surveys, and those are typically tied to surveys. But we have survey data that I think allows us to make some adjustments there. I've asked the staff, because I think it's what you wanted us to do, is to look at that entire corridor, not just the upper end of it. And then we're also looking at additional parking limitations, curbing, red curbing, and so forth, as well as enforcement. So, yeah, I made a note to bring it up in the work meeting. I didn't, but I think our hope is at the next meeting we'll have the additional analysis and metrics around that to be able to come back and report on what we believe would be a viable solution to try to address some of the issues.
Okay, very good.
It's good. Just a question. Let's say we read curb. I don't know how far down that road you read curb, but then you have neighbors, people that are living there that's like they have visitors come over and they can't park in front of their home. I mean,
that's exactly the trade off.
Yeah.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. Anyway,
and signs of no parking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes citizens don't want other people parking there, but then it produces other issues. So we're trying to take a careful look at usage along that corridor. It ebbs and flows, based on what the use is. I was there last night for a grandson who has as an anecdotal. I mean, we've all had this experience, but playing baseball on Monday and Wednesday, and I was trying to observe. At least in that case, there was parking on the west side, but I thought it was reasonable. They were away from the intersection. They were well off from they were well against the curb, and there weren't any safety issues. Now that's different than the middle of a big soccer tournament, obviously. So we'll just try to bring back a balanced recommendation that tries to address the safety issues which are there, but also recognizes that the road is constructed in some locations in a way that can safely accommodate that. The other thing I should have mentioned that we're looking at the staff's looking at doing is to see the possibility of extending that left turn lane further. Right now, it's just on the upper end, and what that would do is provide us a safer place for people to stage to make those turning movements where you have that. And